Tokyo, the most populous metropolitan area on Earth, has always been a symphony of controlled chaos, a neon labyrinth of 37 million souls. But in the final 24 hours of the human era, that symphony reached its closing note. It began not with a bang, but with a strange, golden stillness during the final sunset. As the sun dipped behind the majestic silhouette of Mount Fuji, the thousands of trains that formed the city's complex nervous system began to slow to a permanent, heavy halt. The Shinkansen, the pride of Japanese engineering, sat like silent white ghosts on their elevated tracks, their engines cooling for the last time in history. In Shibuya, the famous crossing, usually a chaotic sea of human movement, was frozen in an eerie, unblinking stasis. This was the final golden hour, a moment of profound beauty where the city's towering architecture was bathed in a warm amber light that no human eye would ever appreciate again. Did you know that Tokyo's energy consumption is so massive that the heat generated by its buildings actually alters the local weather patterns? As the lights began to flicker and fail, the city's artificial heat signature started to dissipate, allowing the natural cold air of the Pacific to reclaim the streets once more. The transition had begun. The world's greatest megacity was about to become the world's greatest tomb. The silence was no longer a threat. It was the new status quo. By the fourth hour of the absolute silence, the legendary neon glow of Shinjuku and Akihabara began its final, agonizing surrender. Tokyo's power grid is a masterpiece of modern complexity, but without the constant, second-by-second adjustments of human engineers, the system's delicate balance collapsed into total chaos. One by one, the massive digital billboards that projected dreams and consumerism into the night sky flickered and died. The electric town was plunged into a darkness it hadn't known since the era of the ancient samurai. This blackout was not just a loss of artificial light, it was a total loss of the city's technological soul. Without the constant hum of millions of air conditioners and massive server farms, the ambient noise of Tokyo dropped by over 80 decibels in a single terrifying hour. Did you know that for the first time in a century, the sound of the ocean waves in Tokyo Bay could be heard echoing through the empty, narrow alleys of Ginza? The city was no longer a living, breathing machine. It was a collection of cold glass and steel skeletons, waiting in the dark for the relentless elements to begin their slow, patient process of digestion. Tokyo was becoming a ghost of its own ambition. Deep beneath the surface, Tokyo's most critical battle for survival was lost within the first 8 hours of the collapse. The city is built on a complex network of reclaimed land and alluvial soil, kept dry only by an army of thousands of electric pumps working 24/7. As the backup generators finally ran dry, the great underground discharge tunnel, the cathedral-like storm sewers began to fail. Millions of gallons of groundwater and brackish water from the Sumida River started their patient, unstoppable ascent. The subway tunnels, the vital arteries of the city, transformed into dark subterranean rivers of rust and silt. This was a silent, invisible invasion from below. The water began to corrode the electrical veins of the transit system, causing ghostly sparks to fly through the dark, abandoned tunnels. Did you know that Tokyo's subway system is so deep that without active pumping, some stations would be completely submerged within half a day? By midnight, the lower levels of Shinjuku Station were already under 3 feet of murky water, a dark mirror reflecting the rusted remains of vending machines and abandoned umbrellas. The city's foundations were being undermined from within, proving that Tokyo's true master was never the architect, but the rising water table. The underground was the first to return to the abyss. At the 12-hour mark of the Great Silence, Tokyo's majestic skyscrapers, those needles of glass and human hubris, became vertical prisons of steel in the high-altitude luxury districts of Roppongi and Shiodome. The complex climate control systems that once regulated the artificial lives of thousands of office workers were dead. Without the constant mechanical circulation of filtered air, the temperature inside these glass monoliths began to equalize with the cold, damp exterior of the Pacific night. Condensation began to form in thick patterns on the interior of the windows, blurring the final view of the darkened city below. This is the vertical freeze, where the internal ecosystems of our tallest buildings begin to rot from the inside out. Did you know that modern skyscrapers are designed to sway in the wind? but they rely on active mass dampening systems to prevent catastrophic structural fatigue. Without electrical power, these stabilizing systems stopped immediately. The buildings began to groan and creak as the heavy night winds from the bay pushed against their massive frames, a haunting sound, like a wooden ship straining in a violent storm. The luxury suites and executive boardrooms were now nothing more than cold, dark caves, their expensive furniture absorbing the humidity of a city that was quickly returning to its swampy primal origins. Tokyo was no longer looking up, it was leaning toward the earth. As the sun rose on the first full day without humanity, the residents of Uno Zoo and the various animal cafes across the city faced a terrifying and incomprehensible new reality. For 16 hours, the captive animals had waited in silence for the familiar sounds of their keepers, but only the whistling wind through the bars answered them. Domesticated life was the first to realize that the ancient pact with man was broken. In the high-end pet boutiques of Aoyama, thousands of designer dogs were trapped behind tempered glass, their cries unheard in the silent, empty streets. But for the wilder inhabitants, the massive crows of Yoshi Park and the macaques on the city's outskirts, this was not a tragedy, but an invitation. Did you know that Tokyo's crows have learned to navigate and use the city's infrastructure to their advantage for decades? By the 16th hour of the collapse, they were already nesting inside the silent shells of traffic lights and scavenging through the abandoned open-air markets of Tsukiji. The hierarchy of the city was flipping in real time. The humans were gone, and the animals were beginning to map out a Tokyo that was no longer a cage, but a vast concrete forest filled with untapped resources and new predatory dangers. The wild was coming home to the neon jungle, 18 hours into the collapse of the machine. The first fires began to bloom across the traditional wooden neighborhoods of old Tokyo. In the narrow districts of Shitamachi, where historic wooden houses are packed tightly together, the lack of human intervention turned small accidents into massive catastrophes. A single short circuit in an old transformer or a chemical leak in a small industrial factory was enough to ignite a blaze that no one would ever fight. Without the world-class Tokyo Fire Department to intervene, the flames spread with a terrifying ancient hunger through the paper and wood of the past. Did you know that Tokyo has burned to the ground multiple times in its long history, only to be rebuilt each time by its resilient people? But this time, there was no one left to clear the ash or lay the new foundations. The smoke rose in thick black plumes, obscuring the Tokyo sky tree and drifting like a funeral shroud over the silent imperial palace. The fire moved through the city like a living, breathing entity, reclaiming the materials of the past and turning the neon future into a scorched landscape of blackened earth and twisted melted metal. The city was purifying itself in the most violent way possible. By the 20th hour, Tokyo's tallest monument, the Sky Tree, began to sing a lonely metallic song of its own. Standing at over 600 meters, the tower is a marvel of anti-seismic engineering, but it is also a giant antenna for the invisible forces of nature. Without the constant hum of its broadcasting equipment, the tower became a massive, useless lightning rod. The wind whistling through its intricate steel lattice created a haunting, low-frequency hum that could be heard for miles across the silent Sumida district. This is the Sky Tree's sigh, the sound of $1 billion structure becoming a rusted needle of iron. Did you know that the specialized paint on these massive structures requires constant manual maintenance to prevent the salt-heavy air of Tokyo Bay from heating the steel? Within 20 hours of the human exit, the first microscopic pits of oxidation were already forming on its surface. The tower, once a symbol of Japan's technological ascent, was now a ticking clock of structural decay. It stood as a silent sentinel over a burning city, a monument to a civilization that reached for the stars but forgot to keep its feet on solid, permanent ground. The Sky Tree was the first to realize that gravity always wins. As the 22nd hour approached, the artificial boundaries between Tokyo and the sea began to dissolve into the rising tide. The massive concrete levees and rows of tetrapods that line Tokyo Bay are the only things preventing the ocean from reclaiming a third of the city's land. Without the constant maintenance and mechanical pumping of these barriers, the sea began its slow, rhythmic assault. The tide, driven by the gravitational pull of a moon that no longer had anyone to watch it, pushed into the canals and over the docks of Odaiba. Did you know that much of Tokyo is built on reclaimed land that is literally sinking back into the earth? Without the active management of the water table, the city began to settle into the mud, making it even easier for the salt water to enter. The luxury shopping malls of the waterfront were the first to be surrendered, their ground floors filled with brackish water and floating debris from a vanished world. The bay was not just a scenic view anymore. It was the city's new and final architect, erasing the lines we had so arrogantly drawn in the sand. The ocean was finally reclaiming its lost territory, one wave at a time. 24 hours have passed. The city of 37 million is now a city of none. The fires have reached the edges of the great green parks, and the water has successfully claimed the heart of the subway systems. Tokyo is no longer a destination. It is a memory recorded only in the settling dust. The final hour of the first day is marked by a profound, heavy silence, broken only by the distant crackle of fire and the lonely cry of a hawk circling the Tokyo Tower. The air, once thick with the industrial smog of millions of cars, is beginning to clear, revealing a sky of 1,000 brilliant stars above the darkened rascacielos. Did you know that most Tokyo residents have never seen the Milky Way due to the city's blinding lights? On this final night, the galaxy finally returned to the city streets. The archives of the human day are officially closed. Tokyo is now a wild, dark landscape, a concrete canyon where biology will begin its long million-year experiment. The transition is complete. The human era has ended, and the night is finally, truly, its own. What we witnessed in these final 24 hours was the rapid, unstoppable deconstruction of the world's most complex machine. Tokyo did not fall because of a violent war or a sudden plague. It fell because it was a system that required a constant human heartbeat to survive. When that heartbeat stopped, the machine simply died. This first day is the most critical chapter in the Shadows archive, for it shows the utter fragility of our greatest triumphs. The concrete will eventually turn to dust, and the steel will return to the earth as rust. Did you know that the earth will eventually erase Tokyo so completely that not even a single bolt from the sky tree will remain in the geological record? For now, the city stands as a haunting, beautiful ghost, a testament to what we once were and a warning of how quickly we can be completely forgotten. The archive of the first day is sealed. The silence is now the only permanent resident of Tokyo, and the darkness has become the only witness to the passing of time. The story of man has ended, but the story of the earth is just beginning.